Every failure is a messenger, whispering, "You're closer than you think, can you hear it?" It's not yelling, it's subtle, like the rustle of leaves on a quiet night or the way sunlight finds its way through the tiniest cracks. Failure isn't here to tear you down, it's here to guide you, redirect you, and if you let it, transform you. Think about this for a moment. What if that setback you've been carrying around wasn't an end, but a course correction? What if the disappointment, the heartbreak, the plan that fell apart, what if it was the universe saying, "Not this way, something better is waiting just around the bend"? Now, take a breath and let that sink in, because so often we resist. We fight the closed door, bang on it, try to force it open. But here's the thing about doors, they're not always meant to open. Sometimes they're there to get you to turn around and notice the one that's already wide open behind you. And I know, believe me, I know failure doesn't feel like a gentle nudge in the moment. It can feel like the weight of the world is pressing down on your chest, like the rug has been pulled out from under you, like you've lost your way. But let me ask you something. When you're standing in the middle of what feels like chaos, do you stop to look for the pattern? Because the pattern is always there. Failure is never random. It's always purposeful, even if its meaning takes time to reveal itself. Imagine you're driving at night and the road ahead is dark except for the stretch illuminated by your headlights. You can't see your destination, but you trust the road is leading you there. Failure works the same way. It's a bend in the road, not the end of it. Now let's get personal. Think back to a moment in your life when something didn't go as planned, when you fell flat on your face. Maybe it was a job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, a dream that seemed just out of reach. At the time, it probably felt like the universe had turned its back on you. But now, looking back, can you see how that moment redirected you, how it taught you something, opened a new door, or led you to an opportunity you never would have considered otherwise? Failure whispers, "You're closer than you think," because it knows something you don't. It sees the bigger picture. It knows that sometimes you have to be cracked open to let the light in. It knows that every no is making space for the right. Here's a story for you. There was a man, a dreamer, an innovator who was fired from his own company. Imagine that. The thing he built with his blood, sweat, and tears was taken away from him. Most people would have crumbled. But this man, he used that failure as fuel. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him because it forced him to start over, to rethink, to create something even better. His name? Steve Jobs. And that failure? It was the stepping stone to the resurgence of Apple and the creation of some of the most iconic innovations of our time. Now, you might be thinking, sure, but I'm no Steve Jobs, but here's the thing you don't have to be. You just have to be willing to see failure for what it really is, a teacher. Every great success story has a chapter labeled failure. And it's not just the big names. Think about the small, everyday victories that come from setbacks. The mom who didn't get the promotion but ended up starting her own business and finding a passion she never knew she had. The student who failed a class only to discover a different path that lit their soul on fire. Failure is not a dead end, it's a signpost. It's saying, this way isn't working. Try another. But let me ask you, are you listening, or are you so caught up in the noise of disappointment that you can't hear the whisper? Take Thomas Edison. He failed 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. And when someone asked him how it felt to fail so much, you know what he said? "I didn't fail. I just found 1,000 ways that didn't work." Can you imagine how different your life would be if you saw your failures that way? Not as defeats, but as data, as clues, as guideposts leading you to where you're meant to be. Now let's bring it closer to home. Look at your own life. What's the failure you've been carrying like a weight on your shoulders? The one you replay in your mind over and over and thinking, what if I had done it differently? What if you put it down for a moment and ask, what is this trying to teach me? How is this redirecting me? Because here's the secret, the universe isn't working against you. It's working for you, always. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when the plan falls apart, the deal falls through, or the dream feels like it's slipping away. Think about a GPS. When you take a wrong turn, it doesn't yell at you or give up on you. It recalculates, it finds another way. Failure is your recalibration. It's not saying you're lost, it's saying rerouting. And here's a surprising thought for you. What if the failure wasn't a failure at all? What if it was exactly what needed to happen to bring you to this moment right here, right now? What if the plan you had wasn't big enough, bold enough, or aligned enough with who you truly are? Let's take it a step further. What if you started to welcome failure, to see it as a friend, a mentor, even a gift? What would change for you? How much freer would you feel, knowing that every stumble, every detour, every closed door is part of your journey? Because here's the truth, failure isn't final unless you make it so. It's the universe asking you, how bad do you want this? Are you willing to try again? Are you willing to grow, to adapt, to see things differently? And maybe, just maybe, the universe has something better in mind for you. Something you can't see yet, but that's waiting just beyond the horizon. So I'll leave you with this: the next time you stumble, the next time a plan falls apart or a dream seems out of reach, ask yourself, what if this is happening for me, not to me? What if this is the universe whispering, you're closer than you think? Can you trust that whisper? Can you lean into it, even when it feels uncomfortable? Because if you do, you might just find that failure isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of something far greater than you ever imagined. The road to success isn't straight, it's paved with U-turns that lead to discovery. Think about that for a second. We're told success is a straight line, right? A clean, predictable path. But let me ask you, when has life ever been predictable? Life doesn't hand you a map with clear directions and say, here, just follow this and you'll get exactly where you want to go. No, life hands you twists, turns, detours, and yes, U-turns. But here's the magic, those U-turns. They're not roadblocks, they're revelations. Picture this, you're driving down a road you think is the right one. You're confident, even excited, but then you see a sign, dead end. Or maybe it's not even a sign, it's just your gut whispering, this isn't it, what do you do? Do you keep driving, hoping somehow the road will magically open up? Or do you turn around and try another way? That moment, that decision, is where discovery begins. Because turning around isn't failure, it's wisdom. It's saying, I trust there's something better waiting. Let's break this down. How often do we cling to a plan, even when it's not working? We say, but I've already come this far. I've invested so much time, so much energy, but what if sticking to the plan is the very thing holding you back? What if the detour is where the breakthrough happens? You see, life isn't linear. It's not a straight highway. It's a winding, unpredictable journey, and every turn, every U-turn has a purpose. Think of J.K. Rowling. Before Harry Potter, she was rejected by 12 publishers. 12 times she heard no, imagine, if she had said, well, I guess this isn't meant to be, imagine if she had stopped. But she didn't. She took those rejections as redirections. She kept going, kept turning until she found the right publisher. And those U-turns, they led to a story that touched millions, maybe even billions of lives. Here's a surprising thought for you. What if the road you're on right now isn't meant to take you to your destination? What if it's only meant to teach you something you'll need when you get there? Because every step, even the wrong ones, are part of the journey. Now let's get personal. Think about a time in your life when you were so sure you were on the right track, but things didn't go as planned. Maybe it was a relationship that ended, a job that didn't work out, a goal that seemed just out of reach. In that moment, it probably felt like everything was falling apart. But now looking back, can you see how it was falling together in a way you couldn't have imagined? Take Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, she was fired from a television job. Fired. They told her she wasn't fit for TV. Now think about that. She could have let that be the end of her story. She could have believed them. But instead, she turned around. She found another way. And that U-turn led her to create one of the most successful talk shows in history. That so-called failure? It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Pause for a moment and think about where you are right now. What's the U-turn you've been avoiding? Maybe it's a relationship you know isn't right. Maybe it's a career path that doesn't light you up anymore. Maybe it's a dream you've been too afraid to chase because starting over feels too risky. But here's the truth, starting over isn't a setback, it's a setup for something greater. Let's talk about Thomas Edison. He didn't just invent the light bulb, he failed thousands of times before he got it right. Thousands. And every failure was a U-turn, pointing him toward the next discovery. When asked about those failures, he said, "I didn't fail, I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work now." Imagine if he had stopped at failure number 500, or 1,000, or 9,999. We wouldn't have the light bulb. His U-turns weren't detours, they were necessary steps on the road to success. Here's another question for you. What if success isn't about the destination at all? What if it's about the journey, the twists, the turns, the unexpected discoveries along the way? Because here's the thing, when you embrace the unexpected, when you lean into the uncertainty, that's when life gets interesting. That's when you grow. That's when you find out what you're really capable of. Think about the GPS on your phone. When you take a wrong turn, what does it do? Does it yell at you? Tell you to give up? No, it recalculates. It finds another route. And guess what? Life does the same thing. The universe doesn't give up on you. It doesn't say, well, you messed up, so that's it. It recalculates, it redirects, but you have to trust it. You have to trust that every U-turn is leading you somewhere better. Let's make this real. Look at your life right now. Where are you resisting the turn? Where are you holding on to a plan that isn't working? Because here's the truth sometimes, the best thing you can do is let go. Let go of the plan, the expectation, the way you thought things should be. And in that letting go, you create space for something new to emerge. I know it's scary. U-turns can feel like failure. They can feel like admitting you were wrong. But what if being wrong was the best thing that ever happened to you? What if it opened a door you never even knew existed? Because that's what U-turns do. They show you possibilities you couldn't see before. Look at Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. She started her career selling fax machines door to door. Can you imagine? But she made a U-turn. She saw a problem, took a risk, and created a billion-dollar company. And that U-turn didn't just change her life, it changed millions of lives. Here's what I want you to remember: the road to success isn't supposed to be straight. It's supposed to challenge you, stretch you, surprise you. And every U-turn, every detour, every unexpected twist, it's all part of the adventure. So I ask you, what if you stopped fighting the turn? What if you stopped seeing it as failure and started seeing it as an opportunity? Because that's what it is. Every U-turn is a chance to discover something new, to grow, to become more of who you were meant to be. Let's go back to that image of driving down a road. You might not be able to see the whole journey, but you don't have to. You only need to see the next turn. And when you trust the road, even when it takes you in a direction you didn't expect, that's when the magic happens. So what's the next turn for you? Are you willing to take it? Are you willing to embrace the uncertainty, the possibility, the discovery? Because the road to success isn't straight, it's paved with U-turns. And those U-turns, they might just lead you to exactly where you're meant to be. Failure doesn't mean you're off course, it means you're refining your direction. Let that sink in for a moment. Think about how often we misinterpret failure, wearing it like a badge of shame, as if it's proof we weren't good enough or that we were chasing the wrong dream. But what if I told you that failure is simply the universe adjusting your sails, nudging you, whispering, not this way, try again, but differently. Pause and imagine this. Picture yourself walking through a dense fog, your destination just out of sight. Each step feels uncertain, and maybe you stumble, maybe you take a wrong turn. Does that mean you're lost? No, it means you're finding your way. The fog of failure is just part of the journey. It doesn't stop you, it shapes you. And here's where it gets interesting. Some of the world's greatest breakthroughs were born in moments of doubt. Can you imagine Thomas Edison surrounded by failed experiments, wondering if he should quit? He didn't see those failures as mistakes, he saw them as steps, as lessons. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Think about that mindset. What if every failure wasn't a dead end, but a refinement? A process of elimination leading you closer to the light, literally, in Edison's case. Let me tell you a story. It's about a man who desperately wanted to succeed. He had talent, drive, and a vision for his life. But at every turn, he was met with rejection. He tried and failed over and over again until the world told him, maybe you're not cut out for this. That man, his name is Steven Spielberg. The same Spielberg whose films would go on to shape generations was rejected from film school not once but twice. And what did he do? He redirected, he refined. He trusted that failure wasn't the end of his story, but the beginning of something greater. Now ask yourself, how many no's are you willing to face on your path to yes? How many times are you willing to fall before you stand taller than ever? Because here's the truth, failure is not a verdict, it's a teacher. It doesn't mean you're off course, it means the course is still being charted. Look at nature for a moment. A river doesn't flow in a straight line. It bends, it curves, it finds its way around obstacles. Every twist and turn makes it stronger, more defined. Your journey works the same way. When you hit a block of rejection, a loss, a so-called failure, it's not the end of the river, it's a chance to carve a new path. Here's another twist for you. Failure isn't just about you. It's about what you're becoming through the process. Every time you fall, you're building resilience. Every time you're redirected, you're learning adaptability. And those qualities, they're the foundation of every great success story. Think about J.K. Rowling. Before she became one of the most successful authors in history, she was rejected by 12 publishers. 12. Can you imagine? She was told her story wasn't worth publishing, that her dream wasn't worth pursuing. But she kept going. She let failure refine her, not define her. And because of that, millions of readers around the world found magic in her words. So let me ask you, what's your magic? What dream are you holding on to, even in the face of rejection? And more importantly, are you willing to let failure shape it, polish it, make it shine even brighter? Failure is a refining fire. It burns away what doesn't serve you, old habits, limiting beliefs, the past that were never meant for you. But you have to trust the process. You have to trust that every no is leading you to a better yes. Imagine a sculptor staring at a block of marble. To everyone else, it looks like a solid, unformed lump. But the sculptor sees something different. They see the masterpiece hidden within. And to reveal it, they chip away bit by bit, mistake by mistake, failure by failure. Each strike of the hammer might look like destruction, but it's actually creation. Your failures are the chisel. They're shaping you into who you're meant to be. And let's not forget, failure often comes right before the breakthrough. It's the darkest hour before dawn. The moment when you think you can't go on, but if you push just a little further, you find the light. Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't fit for television. Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. Can you believe that? But they didn't stop. They trusted that failure was part of their refinement. Let me flip this for you. What if failure isn't the opposite of success, but a vital ingredient? What if every stumble, every setback, every almost is bringing you closer to your true path? Here's another hook for you. The dream doesn't die in failure, it dies in your refusal to try again. Think of a GPS. When you take a wrong turn, does it stop guiding you? No, it recalculates. It finds another way. Failure is your recalibration. It's not saying you're lost, it's saying try this instead. So I ask you, what are you recalibrating toward? What failure have you been resisting when it could be your greatest teacher? Failure doesn't mean you're off course, it means the course is unfolding. It's a dance between doubt and discovery, between falling and rising. And every time you rise stronger, wiser, more aligned with the person you're meant to be. So lean into it. Don't fear the stumble, the no, the rejection. Trust that every closed door is guiding you to the right one. Trust that the universe is working not against you, but with you. Because here's the thing, it always is. Think of failure as the soil where your success takes root, not the dry, barren kind, but the rich, fertile soil, the kind that's alive with potential, waiting for you to plant something extraordinary. Can you see it? That soil isn't there by accident. It's created by every stumble, every heartbreak, every time you thought, I'll never get through this. Now let me ask you, what seeds are waiting to grow from your most challenging moments? What possibilities are lying dormant beneath what feels like the rubble of your so-called failures? Because here's the thing, just like a seed, your growth starts in the dark. And it's in that darkness, in the soil of failure, that something miraculous begins to happen. Take a breath and think about it. A seed doesn't resist the soil, it embraces it. It pushes through, it transforms, and eventually it breaks the surface to reach the light. What if you treated your failures the same way? Not as the end, but as the beginning. Not as a weight holding you down, but as the very thing grounding you so you can rise higher. Let's get real for a moment. I know failure doesn't feel like fertile ground when you're in it. It feels messy, chaotic, and overwhelming. But pause and consider this. Have you ever planted something and seen it grow instantly? Of course not. Growth takes time, patience, faith. The same is true for the seeds of success. And here's where it gets interesting. Those seeds, the ones waiting to grow, are unique to you. No one else has your soil. No one else has lived your experiences, felt your heartbreaks, or learned your lessons. So when you feel like you're stuck in the dirt, remember this, that soil has been tailored to nurture something extraordinary, something that only you can bring into the world. Think about the bamboo tree. You plant the seed, water it, and nothing happens. For weeks, months, sometimes years, it seems like there's no growth. But beneath the surface, something incredible is happening. Roots are spreading, strengthening, laying the foundation for what's to come. And then, seemingly overnight, the bamboo shoots up, growing feet in a matter of days. But without those roots, without that time in the unseen, that growth would never happen. Now, let me ask you, what roots are you growing right now, even if you can't see them yet? What unseen progress is happening beneath the surface of your struggles? Here's a story for you. There was a woman who dreamed of being a writer. She poured her heart into her first manuscript, set it out with hope, and was rejected. Not once, not twice, but 36 times. Imagine that. 36 people telling her, you're not good enough, most people would have quit. But she didn't. She believed in her seed, kept nurturing it, and on the 37th try, her book was published. That woman, J.K. Rowling. And that book, Harry Potter. Now think about that. What if she had stopped at failure number 10? Or 20? Or 35? The world would have missed out on her magic. And here's the thing, the same applies to you. The world is waiting for what's inside of you, but you have to nurture the seed. You have to believe that the soil of your failures is setting you up for something extraordinary. But let me ask you this, are you watering the seed, or are you digging it up every 5 minutes to check if it's growing? Because here's the truth, doubt is like weeds. It strangles growth before it has a chance to thrive. You've got to trust the process, even when it doesn't look like anything's happening. And sometimes the soil feels too heavy, doesn't it? Like there's no way anything could grow from this mess. But think about the lotus flower. It grows in muddy water, and yet it blooms into something pure and beautiful. The mud doesn't hold it back, it fuels its growth. What if your failures are your mud, and what's waiting to bloom from them is your greatest success? I'll tell you something else. The soil of failure teaches you resilience. It teaches you to adapt, to dig deeper, to find strength you didn't know you had. And that resilience, it becomes part of who you are. It's what allows you to face the next challenge, the next dream, with more courage and clarity. Let's take another example. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper job because his editor said he lacked imagination. Imagine that. The man who would go on to create an empire built on imagination was told he didn't have enough of it. But that failure wasn't the end for him. It was the soil. It was the thing that pushed him to try again, to dream bigger, to create something the world had never seen before. And here's the kicker, those failures weren't just stepping stones for Walt Disney or J.K. Rowling or anyone else. They were necessary. They were the very foundation of their success. And the same is true for you. Think about your own life. What's a moment that felt like failure but ended up being the catalyst for something better? Maybe it was a relationship that ended, only to make space for one that truly aligned with who you are. Maybe it was a job you didn't get, but that led you to discover a passion you never knew you had. Those moments, that's the soil. But here's the challenge: you have to be willing to plant the seed, to take the risk, to put yourself out there, to fail. Because if you never plant the seed, how can anything grow? Let me tell you something surprising. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. They're not enemies, they're partners. Failure prepares the soil, and success is what blooms when the time is right. And remember this, you don't have to plant a forest overnight. Start with one seed, one step, one decision to see failure not as the end, but as the beginning of something new. So I ask you again, what seeds are waiting to grow from your most challenging moments? And are you willing to trust the soil even when you can't see what's happening beneath the surface? Because if you are, I promise you something extraordinary is waiting to bloom. What if the door that slammed shut wasn't a rejection, but an invitation? An invitation to build your own door, to shape something so uniquely yours, so perfectly aligned with your purpose that it could never have been handed to you by anyone else. Think about that for a moment. How many times in life have you stood before a closed door, knocking, pleading, hoping for it to open, and when it didn't, when the silence became deafening or the rejection loud, it felt personal. It felt like the world was saying, no, not you, but what if the world was actually saying, not this, something better, something only you can create? Let me ask you, how do you respond to those slammed doors? Do you let them define you, or do you let them refine you? You see, doors are interesting things. They can shut you out, yes, but they can also shut out everything that doesn't belong to your path. The trick is to realize that the closed door isn't the end, it's the beginning of your creativity. It's the universe whispering it's time to build your own. Let's talk about someone who did just that. Picture a young woman, brilliant and determined, with a vision to become a lawyer. She applied to law school, poured her heart into the application, and waited. The answer came rejected, not once, but multiple times. Now, most people would have stopped there, but this woman, she decided the rejection wasn't the end of her story, it was the start of something extraordinary. Her name? Sarah Blakely. She didn't become a lawyer. Instead, she invented Spanx, turned a $5,000 investment into a billion-dollar empire, and changed the way women feel about themselves. Do you see the magic in that? The door to law school didn't just close, it locked, but in that moment she didn't give up. She shifted. She built her own door, her own opportunity, and it was far greater than what she originally imagined. So let me ask you, what doors in your life have slammed shut? Maybe it was a dream job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, or a plan that fell apart. Have you considered that the no you received wasn't rejection, but redirection? Because sometimes the closed door isn't a loss, it's protection. Take Walt Disney, fired from a newspaper for lacking creativity. Think about that for a second. Fired for lacking creativity. Imagine if he'd believed that. Imagine if he'd let that one slammed door define him. But instead, he chose to build his own. And today, Disney isn't just a name, it's a world, a legacy, a universe of imagination and joy that touches millions. Here's the truth. Every obstacle you face is an opportunity to innovate, to dream bigger, to dig deeper. A closed door asks you to look inward, to tap into the part of you that says, I can do this differently. And isn't that what resilience is all about? But let's get real. Building your own door isn't easy. It takes courage. It takes faith in something you can't yet see. It takes the audacity to believe that you're worthy of creating your own path when the world seems to say otherwise. Imagine this, you're standing in a hallway. Every door you try is locked. You're frustrated, maybe even ready to give up. But then, in the silence, you hear a voice. It's faint but steady. It says, look at your hands. You look down, and there they are, your tools, the tools you've always had, but maybe forgot about your creativity, your determination, your uniqueness. And suddenly you realize you don't need to wait for someone to open a door for you. You can build your own. Take Oprah Winfrey. She was told early in her career that she was unfit for television. Can you imagine? Oprah, unfit for television. But instead of shrinking, she expanded. Instead of waiting for a door to open, she built her own one that led to a media empire and a platform to uplift millions. And it's not just the Oprahs and Walt Disneys of the world, it's the everyday people too. The teacher who didn't get tenure but started a community program that changed lives. The single mom who couldn't find a job and ended up launching a home business that supported her family. Here's a story closer to the ground. There's a man working a steady job in tech. One day he gets laid off. The door slams shut, and for a moment he's lost. But then instead of wallowing, he picks up a camera, something he'd always loved but never pursued. That passion becomes his new career, filmmaking. He turns his layoff into a launch pad. Do you see the pattern here? It's not about the door that closes. It's about what you choose to do next. But here's the question you need to ask yourself when the door closes. Do you stand there knocking, or do you step back and say, how can I build something better? Because here's the truth, waiting for someone to open a door for you is giving away your power. Building your own door, that's taking it back. And here's the surprising thing: when you start building, the universe starts helping. It sends you the right people, the right resources, the right inspiration, but you have to take the first step. Think of J.K. Rowling, rejected by 12 publishers. 12. Imagine if she had stopped at the first no, or the second, or the 10th. But she didn't. She believed in her story and her door, and today the Harry Potter series has touched billions. So here's the challenge for you. The next time a door closes, ask yourself, what's the opportunity here? What can I create? Because the world doesn't need more people waiting for permission. It needs more people building doors. And maybe, just maybe, the door you create will lead to something you never dreamed possible. Something that doesn't just open for you, but for others. Because here's the beautiful thing about building your own door, it often becomes a gateway for others to walk through. So I'll leave you with this: don't fear the slammed doors. Don't let rejection define you. Let it inspire you. Let it inspire you. Let it push you to create, to innovate, to build something so uniquely you that no one else could have made it. The question isn't whether doors will close. They will. The question is, what will you do when they do? Will you wait for someone to open another? Or will you pick up your tools, tap into your resilience, and build your own? Success is never about avoiding failure. It's about dancing with it until it turns into your partner. Imagine that for a moment. Life, with all its twists and turns, isn't some perfectly choreographed waltz where every step lands exactly as planned. No, it's messy. It's unpredictable. Sometimes you stumble, sometimes you step on toes, and sometimes you find yourself completely out of rhythm. But here's the magic: if you stay on the floor and keep moving, failure can transform from something you fear into a partner that leads you into success. Now, I want you to picture this: a dance floor stretching out into infinity. The music is playing. It's the soundtrack of your life. And in the middle of it all, there's failure, standing there, hand extended, waiting for you to take the lead. What do? Most people hesitate. They freeze. They back away, whispering, not me. I can't do this. But what if I told you that failure isn't here to trip you up? It's here to teach you the steps. Think about the first time you tried to dance. Were you graceful? No, you were awkward. You fumbled. But you didn't quit, did you? You kept going, learning one step at a time until the awkwardness faded, replaced by confidence. That's how it works. The same is true with life. Success doesn't come to those who avoid falling. It comes to those who embrace the fall and use it to find their footing. Here's the thing: failure isn't the villain of your story. It's the choreographer. It's setting the stage for the next act of your life, showing you moves you didn't know you had. But you have to trust the process. You have to be willing to trip, to lose balance, to feel the sting of a misstep. Because every time you stumble, you're learning, you're growing, you're getting closer to mastering the dance. Let's take a moment here. Think back to a time when you failed at something. Maybe it was a project that fell apart, a relationship that ended, or a goal that seemed just out of reach. In that moment, it probably felt like the end of the world. But now, with the clarity of hindsight, can you see how that failure taught you something, how it shaped you? Maybe it pushed you in a direction you never would have chosen on your own, but that turned out to be exactly where you needed to go. Here's a story that always moves me. There was a young man who dreamed of becoming a musician. He poured his heart into his craft, practicing for hours, auditioning for every opportunity. And every time he was told, "You're not good enough." Rejected over and over, he started to believe it. But one day, tired of trying to fit into someone else's mold, he decided to do things his way. He stopped chasing approval and started creating from his soul. That man was Elvis Presley. And those failures, they weren't rejections, they were redirections, guiding him to a style and sound that would change the world. Let me ask you something. What if failure wasn't something to avoid? What if it was the very thing you needed to step into your greatness? Because here's the truth, you can't tiptoe your way to success. You have to leap, knowing you might fall, trusting that even the fall is part of the dance. Imagine a tightrope walker. Every step is a risk. Every step carries the possibility of falling, but they don't focus on the fall, they focus on the balance. And here's what's fascinating, even when they wobble, even when it looks like they're about to go down, they don't stop moving. They keep adjusting, keep shifting until they find their rhythm again. That's the secret to success. It's not about never losing balance. It's about recovering it again and again until you reach the other side. And let's not forget, failure has a way of teaching us humility. It reminds us that we're human, that perfection isn't the goal. Growth is. So often we're so afraid of looking foolish, of making mistakes, that we never even step onto the floor. But let me tell you something, the people who achieve greatness are the ones who are willing to look foolish. They're willing to fall flat on their faces, pick themselves up and try again, because they know that every stumble is a step closer to the dance they were born to perform. Think of J.K. Rowling, rejected by 12 publishers. 12. Imagine if she had stopped after the first or the second or even the 10th. But she didn't. She kept going, even when the world said no, even when it felt like the universe was closing doors left and right. And because she stayed in the dance, because she refused to give up, she went on to create a story that touched millions. Here's what I want you to remember: the dance is always worth it. Even when the steps feel awkward, even when you're out of sync, because every time you get back up, every time you try again, you're becoming more of who you were meant to be. Success isn't about reaching the finish line, it's about who you become along the way. Now let's get real for a second. What's the failure you're afraid of? The one that's keeping you on the sidelines? Is it the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, or maybe it's the fear that you're not enough? Whatever it is, I want you to look it in the eye and ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Because here's the truth, the worst isn't falling. The worst is never trying. The worst is letting fear keep you from stepping onto the floor. And here's the beauty of it, failure isn't permanent. It's fluid. It's constantly changing, shaping itself into opportunities you can't even imagine yet. But you have to be willing to move with it, to let it teach you, to let it lead you to places you never thought you'd go. Picture this, you're at a wedding. The music is playing and everyone's on the dance floor, laughing, spinning, moving without a care in the world. And there you are, standing on the sidelines, too afraid to join in because you might mess up. But here's the thing, nobody cares if you mess up. They're too busy dancing their own dances, making their own mistakes, living their own lives. So why not step out? Why not take the risk? Because the joy isn't in getting every step right. The joy is in the movement. So I'll ask you again, are you willing to dance with failure? Are you willing to let it guide you, to trust that even when the steps feel wrong, they're leading you somewhere right? Because when you do, when you embrace the stumbles, the falls, the missteps, you'll find that success isn't some far-off destination. It's here, right now, in the dance itself. Your greatest success story isn't written in spite of failure, it's written because of it. Let that idea settle for a moment. Every stumble, every misstep, every almost but not quite is part of the story you're meant to live. It's the texture, the richness, the soul of your journey. Can you see it? Think about the most compelling stories you've ever heard. They all have something in common: struggle. No one wants to hear about someone who coasted through life without a hitch. That's not inspiring. That's not real. The heroes we admire are the ones who got knocked down, maybe even knocked out, but found a way to rise again. Here's the truth, failure isn't a detour on the road to success. It is the road, it's the uneven pavement, the potholes, the sharp turns that force you to pay attention, to adjust, to grow. Without those moments, there's no depth. Without the struggle, there's no story worth telling. Picture this. You're reading a book about someone achieving their dream, but the pages are blank, just a single sentence. They set a goal and achieved it, that's it. No conflict, no drama, no obstacles. Would you keep reading? No, because it's the challenges, the setbacks, the moments of doubt that make the ending so powerful. And here's the thing, your story works the same way. Every failure you faced, every heartbreak, every rejection, every time you've said, why me? Those are the moments that are building you. They're adding layers of wisdom, resilience, and perspective. Let me ask you something. What's the most difficult moment you've ever faced? Really think about it. Was it a loss, a failure, a time you felt completely and utterly stuck? Now, take a step back and ask yourself, what did that moment teach you? How did it shape you? Because I guarantee if you're honest with yourself, you'll see that it didn't destroy you, it transformed you. Take Oprah Winfrey. She was fired from her first television job and told she wasn't fit for TV. Fired, can you imagine that? The same woman who became a global icon of inspiration and empowerment. Do you think her success story would resonate as deeply if she hadn't faced that rejection? Now, I want you to think of your own life. How many times have you let failure define you? How many times have you told yourself, this is the end, when it was really just the middle of the chapter? Because let me tell you something, the middle of the chapter is where the magic happens. It's where the hero learns, grows, and discovers their strength. And here's a surprising thought: failure doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you relatable. Your story, with all its twists and turns, has the power to inspire someone else. Because when you've been through the fire and come out the other side, you have something valuable to share. Your resilience becomes a beacon for others who are walking their own difficult path. Think about J.K. Rowling. She was rejected by 12 publishers before someone finally took a chance on Harry Potter. 12 publishers said, no thanks today, she's one of the most successful authors in history. But here's the thing, if she had given up after the first, second, or even 11th rejection, the world would have missed out on an entire universe of magic. Can you see the pattern? The people who achieve greatness aren't the ones who avoid failure, they're the ones who use it. They take the pain, the rejection, the disappointment, and they let it fuel their fire. Now let's get practical. How do you do this in your own life? How do you turn failure into the foundation of your greatest success story? First, stop seeing failure as an end. It's not the end. It's a step. It's feedback. It's the universe saying, not this way, try again. Second, change the way you talk to yourself about failure. Too often we use language that tears us down. I'm such an idiot, I'll never get this right. I'm not cut out for this. But what if instead you said, this is part of my process. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm getting closer. Third, look for the lesson. Every failure comes with a gift. Sometimes it's obvious, other times it takes years to reveal itself. But it's always there. What did that setback teach you? What strength did it uncover? And finally, share your story. Don't be afraid to show the world where you've stumbled, because here's the secret: vulnerability is strength. When you share your struggles, you give others permission to embrace their own. Think of Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison minus 27 years. Can you imagine the depth of that struggle? And yet, he came out not bitter, not broken, but stronger, more determined, and with a vision for a better world. His failures, his setbacks, his time in the darkness, they weren't separate from his success. They were the very foundation of it. So here's the question: what foundation are you building? Are you letting failure break you, or are you using it to build something extraordinary? Because every stumble adds depth to your story. Every setback makes the comeback that much sweeter. Right now, this very moment, you're in the process of writing your story, and the pen is in your hand. What kind of story will it be? Will it be a story of resilience, of courage, of rising again and again, no matter how many times you fall? Because here's the truth: your success isn't about avoiding failure, it's about embracing it. It's about seeing every misstep as a stepping stone, every rejection as redirection, every fall as an opportunity to rise higher than before. Let me leave you with this: the greatest stories, the ones that move us to tears and give us goosebumps, are never about perfection. They're about people who faced the impossible and kept going anyway. So what will your story be? What will you do with your failures? Because they're not there to stop you, they're there to shape you. And when you embrace them, when you let them add depth and richness to your journey, you'll discover that your greatest success story isn't written in spite of failure, it's written because of it.